Broadcasting from the Hip Hop Weekly studios, I'd like to welcome you to another episode of Civic Cypher. I am your host, Ramses Ja.
He is Ramses Ja. I am Q Ward. You are listening to Civic Cypher.
You know what's crazy?
No, I don't know what's crazy.
Allow me to tell you. Stereotypes.
Stereotypes are kind of wild.
Yeah, and that's what we're going to talk about today. One of the things that comes up quite a bit in our conversations with people has to do with their upbringing being surrounded by stereotypes with respect to Black people. So today's show, we're going to be dealing with a lot of stereotypes. We're going to talk about an incident in Ohio of a couple that was shopping while Black, and they had the police called on them. And that's a very traumatic experience for a lot of Black people at different points in our lives. But it's kind of a shared trauma. And for folks that may not have access to it, we're going to give you some insight.
While Black as a suffix is really
yeah, sure.
troubling.
We're also going to spend some time talking about protesting while Black. Mm-hmm. That while Black suffix often enough kind of makes it feel, you know, as reported by the news or just kind of in conversation, it makes it feel a little bit more sinister, a little bit more criminal.
It should feel sinister and criminal.
Right, because it's been designed to paint us in that way.
You feel that way.
Sure. So, and we're also going to use our Way Black History Fact to talk about the basis of a lot of these stereotypes as well. So a lot in store for you today. And hopefully this will be an educational episode for a lot of folks who've been wondering where the basis of all this stuff comes from. So we're definitely going to get into that. But first and foremost, we are going to be celebrating a tad bit of Ebony Excellence. Today's Ebony Excellence is brought to you by Major Threads, for the finest in menswear. Check majorthreads.com. And we have a video that we're going to play.
Hi, I'm Danae Benton, actor, thank you, and proud CMU alum. Earlier tonight, CMU and the Tony Awards presented the 2023 Excellence in Theater Education Award. And while I am certain that the current governor of my home state of Florida will be changing. That he will be changing the name of this following town immediately. We were honored to present this award to the truly incredible and life-changing Jason Zembic Young.
Okay, so in short, that wonderful display of courage for calling out what we believe to be racist behavior and divisive leadership on the part of Ron DeSantis, calling that out was Broadway star Danae Benton, who's known for her roles in Hamilton and Into the Woods. Of course, she compared DeSantis to Ku Klux Klan leader, as she acknowledged Florida teacher Jason Zembic Young as the winner of this year's Excellence in Theater Education Award. And that amount of courage, and of course, on that type of stage, is a beaming example of Ebony Excellence if I've ever seen it. So I salute you. So now let's talk about shopping. So, you know, off the top of your head, can you think of any stories from your life where shopping was a particularly traumatic experience that you believe the trauma was based solely on or the additional trauma was based on you being Black?
For some of our listeners, I don't want to insult them by making this some singular occurrence that stood out in my head from the one time it happened. Like, of course, all the time.
All the time, yeah.
There's a movie when I was younger that was written, directed, and produced, I believe, by Eddie Murphy called Boomerang. And I remember there was a massive uproar in Hollywood and in the media because it was a movie about executives, like advertising executives in the fashion and like fragrances and, in that whole world. And none of the main characters are white. And people were like really insulted and angered by it.
Yeah.
When that had been the case in the reverse for all of history.
Yeah.
And no one had anything to say. And there is a scene in that film where these very, very wealthy cosmetic marketing and advertisers, their executives, are shopping at a men's clothing store. And the salesperson immediately reminds them that there's no layaway and that they don't keep cash in the store. These three gentlemen have on suits. It's very, very clear that they are well-to-do, if you will. Again, marketing executives. But this salesperson saw three black men. It didn't care, or it didn't matter that they had money or how they were dressed or how they spoke. They were black. So they had to be there to either steal something, or they clearly could not afford anything that was there. So whenever they would grab something that they liked, he would make it known to them how expensive it was. That is $1,200 or, whatever the price was to kind of discourage them from even looking. And then reminded them, we don't have layaway. And when one of them simply suggested that they were okay, before he walked away and left them alone, made sure that they knew we don't keep cash in the store.
Yeah. I think that that speaks to, that's sort of like art imitating life. Because that was a movie, but I think that illustrates how we have this as Black people, this collective trauma, this almost like a shared experience. I know that if I encounter someone I've never met before, but grew up in the United States, who's Black, who might have grown up in a different city, different state, that they will understand the feeling of shopping while Black.
I mean, like you said, art imitating life. That's why that scene was in the movie.
Yeah, exactly.
Everybody Black that saw that movie understood it.
It was funny.
It immediately.
Yeah. Not funny because it's funny, but funny because the movie perhaps captured it so well and it was so relatable. Right. So in that way. Now, I want to share a story about when I was, I believe it was my first year of high school. But first, I want to discuss why we're talking about this. So as I mentioned, there is a video that has gone viral, and the Black Information Network actually covered the story. So I'll read a bit about the story just to kind of bring you, the listener, up to speed on what kind of triggered this whole show, these stereotypes, right? So I'll read a bit. Bed Bath & Beyond is facing online backlash after staff at an Ohio store called the police on a Black couple and accused them of shoplifting because they had too many, quote, high-ticket items in their cart. Footage posted by Lamar Richards on June 16th shows him and his boyfriend confronting store employees at a location in Toledo while a police officer is present. And this is him talking, quote, "I'd like to understand why police were called. That's very simple. Why were the police called with the three Black people thinking that we were shoplifting?" He asked a female worker. He goes on to say, "I paid $600 for my things, so obviously I didn't shoplift. I want to understand why you thought I was shoplifting." And then the staff member says, "If there's a big purchase item, there's usually a question. We just want to make sure." Richard said, "Okay, usually a question, I can understand that. But police being called, I can't understand that." So we saw this video and we recognize that feeling that Richards and his partner were having in that moment. I believe there was a comment that he made that was very similar to the scene that you just described in Boomerang Q, where he says to Richard says to the employee at the Bed Bath & Beyond, he says to her, "I paid for this with a debit card, not with a credit card, using money that I earned with my degree." That was a statement.
That I earned. from my job
with yeah, exactly.
with my degree.
That's a bar. That's a bar, ain't it? And, for other people that feel like, oh, it's just a misunderstanding. Oh, these people exist, Q. I see your face.
I'm sure they do. The problem is you'd have to be able to provide me a counterexample.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's what
to present it to me as a misunderstanding.
Sure.
And I know you can't because it doesn't happen.
Right.
This is Maggie B. Noen, and we'll be right back with more Civic Cypher after a quick break.
I'm Donald Trump.
And I'm Joe Biden.
And there's only one thing that could bring me and Sleepy Joe together.
Come on, man. Don't corn pop me.
That's in support of the Independent Riot podcast, where they interview independent thinkers on controversial ideas like the dangers of voice cloning technology.
But is it available on any gramophone machine, Donald?
Yes, Joe, it is. And it's bigly important. Many people are saying, that's the Independent Riot podcast. Not right, not left, just real. Subscribe now.
Or I'll sock you in your mouth, Jack.
But these people exist. And so for those people in your world, our listener, maybe you recognize that this is a thing, but maybe the people around you don't. Okay? And the people that you have conversations with and trying to help us tell our stories. So for the people that think that it might just be a misunderstanding, don't make a big deal out of it. Why are you filming? Why are you recording? Clearly, we're just protecting our interest. We didn't know it was an honest mistake, that sort of stuff, right? Because people feel this way. Those people are not looking beyond the incident that is in front of them. Those people are not realizing that indeed it is a lifetime of having that sort of monkey on your back, in a manner of speaking, that nervousness when shopping through or walking through a store shopping. The craziest thing, just a real quick example, the craziest thing for me is when I go into a store hoping to find something and I don't find what I'm wanting and I have to leave the store empty-handed. It plagues me constantly. The reason for that is because if I go into the store and I don't find what I want and I have to leave the store empty-handed, I still, at 40 years old, have that constant companion, that fear, that trauma that says they're going to think I came in here to steal something.
The really, really sad and really infuriating truth to what you just said is as soon as you said it, my stomach started hurting.
Because you understand.
I know exactly. I knew your why without you having to even express it. And it's that way with going into a store and not buying something. It's that way when getting poor service and still
having to
feeling obligated to tip.
Yep.
It is that, like you said, that companion that's always with us, where we have to make these decisions through this prism that is so incredibly unfair, so incredibly frustrating, but so incredibly ever present.
It's constant. Yeah. Yeah. So let me give you an example. Once upon a time, this is mind you, I have a ton of examples, but this one was very scary for me. Very, very scary for me. First, let me give you a little bit better background. If you're new to this show, you may not know this. My father was a minister. I don't say that because I believe it's necessarily virtuous. I say that because I understood quite well the difference between right and wrong, according to the majority of the principles that we share as human beings.
It speaks to a type of upbringing,
more than moral code.
Yeah, trying to come across as virtuous.
Yes. Okay. Thank you, Q. So, I knew better than to steal. In addition, I recognized that the consequences for doing anything outside of what is expected of you while being Black are more severe than the consequences of doing something outside of what it is expected of you while being white. In other words, if I a black person wants to drink beer as an underage teenager in high school, the consequences would be far worse for me, potentially, if the police showed up than they might be for, my friends who were not as melanated, and on and on. The consequences for everything. Beer is a kind of a low-hanging example, but you can imagine.
No, I mean, but it's good to use a slightly benign example.
Thank you.
To point out the contrast, right? You show up to a party where the teenagers don't look like us, and it's a slap on the wrist, like, and almost very literally, hey, don't do this again. We'll tell your parents, kind of thing.
Yeah,
we're going to jail.
Yeah,
charges are being pressed.
Yes,
lawyers have to be involved.
Right, parents, all that stuff.
Hopefully, that's all that happened.
Yeah.
Hopefully, this does not escalate into something far more sinister for no reason at all, except for because of the way that you look.
Sure. And it's important that, so a lot of people that don't live in this skin or have the Black experience in the United States of America, and by that, I don't mean by proximity. I mean by actually waking up inside of a Black body with melanin, but your body producing melanin that turns it brown, beautiful brown color. That experience, living that life, you cannot know the reality. And so for people who might say, listen, you're just imagining these things. It's the world is a fairer place than you think. We elected a Black president. People think this, right? You cannot make that judgment only having lived the part of the experience that affords you the privilege to even fix your mouth to say that. I'll continue. As a teenager, I went to the mall after school, which is what we did. Once upon a time, we didn't all have cell phones and whatever, we actually had to hang out with each other. And that was our friend group and our followers, et cetera. Right. And a place to do this, place to be social was at the mall. Right. Went to the mall one day and went into, it might've been it was a drugstore, like a Walgreens or something. And I walked into the store through the outside door. In other words, I was using this store to gain access to the mall. It had two entrances, one from the mall side and one from outside. So I'm coming in from the outside. Walked into the store just fine. But mind you, I just got out of school, so I have my backpack on. I'm walking through the store. Remember, I'm not buying anything. I'm just going into the mall. And when I get to the front of the store, the alarm thing beeps. And, I've been through some really tense moments in my life. I've had to come to terms with my own mortality. I have not been that scared maybe 4 or 5 times ever. Because when that alarm beeped, those people got to manhandling me and they were yelling and screaming and I didn't know what was going on because of course I didn't steal anything. I mean, just to give you the end of the story, I didn't steal anything. But the way that they approached me as though I was already convicted of the capital murder, you know what I mean? Like they wrestled me. I'm physically not a big person. I was much smaller when I was in school. I was a child still. I might have been 14, ninth grade, they and these are men, the mall security, that sort of person. I don't remember if it was police or not, but it might have been because there were so many people there. And they pushed me over the counter after they took my backpack, and they had my hands behind my back and they were just holding me. I didn't get handcuffed or anything, but they were holding me there. And, it was so aggressive. And then my friends that I was with, they were powerless because remember, they're children too. So they're standing on the other side. And they're thinking the worst. They're like, oh my God, Ramses got caught stealing in the store. How did he steal? We just walked through the store. So the end of that story is they started going through my backpack, because obviously they were checking my person to see if I had anything, and then they go through my backpack. And then they take out, they first looked through my backpack. There's nothing in my backpack except homework and like pencils and stuff. So they're putting everything, they put the backpack through the beeping machine or whatever to see if the shoplifting gate, I guess. And then my backpack beeped. I remember that. And then they started taking my backpack, everything out of it. So the big zipper and then the little tiny zipper, and they're putting everything through to try to figure out what was beeping the thing. Then they took out, there used to be these notebook holders, and they were like kind of like trapper keepers sort of things. It's basically would hold all your homework and your notes and everything from your different classes. They took out my trapper keeper thing, and they held that through the
Ramses is saying trapper keeper thing because that is from a generation prior.
Yeah, you may not know.
Most of us know what a trapper keeper is.
Okay.
I'm watching his face as he's trying to describe
It's a folder.
It'd be like saying, a Coca-Cola thing. Like, no, just a Coke.
Yeah.
It's a trapper keeper.
Yeah, that's what I had. Anyway, so they held it through the machine or the gate thing, and it beeped. So then they zipped it open, and it's trapper keeper, and it's like kept everything safe. So they zipped it. It was basically like a folder or a briefcase, but for kids, right? Opened it up. I had to explain it. Opened it up, and it still had that tag that causes the gates to beep in it. Now, you could visibly look at it and see that it was worn. It was well used. I had it for, maybe I had it all that year. But I suspect, because I didn't grow up with a lot of money, if the stuff still was working, let it ride, I probably had it for a few years. But that little sticker that causes the alarm to beep was still in the folder. And so when I initially purchased it, because my mom purchased it for me to go to school, it had it in there, and they never took it off, right? So that at 14 years old confirmed exactly what it was that I thought might happen if I was suspected of shoplifting. Call the authorities. It's a 4-alarm fire. Let's get everybody down here. There's a criminal, and they don't come to the table with, hey, this might be a misunderstanding, like they do, because I've seen this happen.
Oh, yeah.
At affluent department stores, because I shop in places like this.
Built-in benefit of the doubt for everyone else is triggering.
Yeah. Excuse me, ma'am, we must have forgotten to take something off of one of your items. Can we check that out and make sure that you're okay? Even if that person is suspected of stealing, you spare them the humiliation.
That person is stealing.
Yeah, you spare them the humiliation. And in my case, they were hurting me. I'll never forget that. Like I was that afraid. In that moment, I somehow disappointed my mother, my family, my friends, my community. I always tried to do the right thing. I always tried to be a good person. I'm not going to say that I've always been perfect. I've had to learn what it means to be a man.
Yeah,
that's called growing up. But
perfect is not even a word that I can use for anything I've ever done throughout my entire existence. Somebody called me perfect before, it made me cringe.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, we
are learning.
We ain't that over here.
But listen, watch this. I think this example and your example also shows how the point I'm trying to make, which is I had to learn, despite having a strong moral code and an upbringing, kind of knowing more or less what was right from wrong. I had to learn what it meant to be a good man.
Yeah,
I had to learn, and oftentimes we don't have the grace as Black men to be able to learn, to make a mistake and learn from it. We're held to a standard of adults when we're children. And treated like adults.
Yeah, that's because two things are true. One is that criminal element is baked in if you look like us.
Right.
So the reason why you're not given any grace is because you're not making a mistake. You're being a criminal. That's what you are. That's who you are. So you're doing what it's in your nature to be that.
Right.
You know what I mean? And we're assumed to also always be poor. I thought of an example while you were telling your story, just to make this as quick as I possibly can, when I was shopping for my car.
Yes.
The car that I have now. Yeah. And I remember I was asking all of these questions, and the guy said to me in these words, so I ended up, of course, not buying a car from him. You're asking all these questions, sir. Can you even afford this car?
No.
And I was like, wow. Now, of course, I didn't wear a suit to the car dealership, but to be petty, I did screenshot my account balance at the time. And it just so happened that this was this way. I don't want anybody to read into this. I had enough money in my account that day to buy the car cash. So
it's a nice car.
The sales, very nice car. The sales manager at that dealership got a screenshot of my account balance. I did not have that kind of money for real, but that day the account balance was popping.
Yeah.
And I got to send that screenshot to that sales manager. As you can imagine, he was very upset and did a lot to try to win my business back, but it was too late because I knew the only reason this person assumed I couldn't afford this car was because I look like Q.
I think Q is a good looking man.
I appreciate you, brother.
Yes, sir.
Likewise.
Listen up. We got a lot more here. We're going to take a pause for the cause.
Black, man. That's
stereotypes, man. They really do have real world impacts. We're going to talk more about it in just a second.